has a much greater profile elsewhere in the world than it has here in Europe, where, despite consistent sales growth, it has yet to break into the top 10 best-selling cars in the supermini class. You might not imagine you'd notice that kind of difference, but combine it with a longer bonnet and front overhang, a shorter rear overhang, a roof that has been lowered by 5 mm and a C-pillar that's much slimmer and more upright than it was, and it begins to explain why the new car appears so markedly changed when compared with the old model. The Rio not only has a better stance but also a much more convincing air of visual sophistication and maturity about it than the cutsy-looking, big-featured third-generation car. It may be a touch less characterful, but it certainly looks serious about its assault on Europe. It also looks more like a car deserving of having a fairly large amount of money spent on it. Under its skin, the Rio remains a conventionally constructed supermini with a steel body, a front-mounted engine, an inline gearbox, driven front wheels, a McPherson strut front suspension and a torsion beam at the rear. Sound is how we characterize the last Rio's cabin, and neither description is misplaced in its replacement. Kia measures itself chiefly against Volkswagen, and it's a yardstick that manifests in sensible placement of most the car's switchgear. The temperature and blower are controlled by knobs, as they should be, with their own digital readout, ditto, and the USB socket, which glows invitingly, is sited front and center, while a smattering of other ancillary functions migrate to buttons on the center console. Kia's improved build quality provided a pleasant surprise in the last generation, but its failure to move the game significantly on now generates pause for thought. The cabin materials feel much like the same medley of plastics that graced the previous car, so while they're fine to look at and touch, and apparently well secured, they are not a match for the best of the European competition. The Rio's cabin design is correspondingly unremarkable. Kia is hardly alone in making its touchscreen infotainment system look a bit like an afterthought, but its more successful competitors tend to at least set it against the striking smoking dashboard. Of being relatively quiet, tractable from low revs and parsimonious enough to compete with a small diesel's running costs. With modest expectations applied, being fast enough is much the same as being good enough. 2 up, the Rio reached 60 miles per hour from rest in 10.0 seconds, almost a second and a half quicker than its 1.4-liter engined predecessor we figured 5 years ago, and marginally quicker than even the 1.5-liter Mazda 2 tested. It helps that only one gear change is required to get there, with the second of this Rio's 5 very long ratios being good for the national speed limit. Third gear is sufficiently drawn out to hit 100 miles per hour within the 1-mile mark of Millbrook Straight. Getting there, it must be said, is a mite less than compelling. Incredibly industrious the 3-pot may well be, but the upper reaches of its delivery are muted compared with the drummy excitableness of Ford's 1.0-liter EcoBoost triple.